Welcome back, Facebook. How are we doing this evening? I'm doing pretty well myself. I'm excited to have another riveting conversation with one of my many intelligent and gifted friends. Tonight's topic will be on masculine and feminine energy, which, as all my people know, this is one of my very favorite subjects. I'm and Jessica Atchison, one of my dear friends, and we're going to be having a. Oh, there you
Oh, wow,
are.
that was super fast.
Don't you just love when technology actually works?
It works. Yeah, I've never had it work that quickly. Like normally it goes adding, 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 adding.
Hmm. Bing, bang, boom. Here we go.
It must be because
All
we're
right.
we're fellow anarchists. The stars have aligned.
The power of will and intention.
How are you?
I'm really good. I just had a nice dinner. My belly is full, and been preparing notes for this one. So that's how you
Love
know I'm
it.
serious.
People are loving on this conversation. I think people have a lot of ideas of what we might talk about, or I think somebody had mentioned, is this better not be about the modern feminist movement or something?
Oh, geez. I mean, you could argue that that speaks to just how polarized and, dare I say, mind controlled people are on the topic.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different ways you could go about this, um, which is why I took my time personally deciding exactly how I wanted to approach this topic with you, Jessica. But I think we got a pretty good idea and some pretty good content to go about here.
Definitely. There's
So,
definitely a lot of perspectives.
yes, yes, but only one truth. Am I right?
Oh,
So, um, I will start by just kind of like, you know, I guess briefly laying out the foundation of exactly how we wanted to approach this. Or, I mean, me personally, I felt guided to touch on this topic from a more spiritual perspective, because a lot of people they hear these words masculine and feminine and they automatically sort of like go a sort of almost materialistic route, like instantaneously their brain fires in that way when you see these things that, just men and women and sex and these very basic surface level concepts. So off the bat, um, just for those who this is new information for, I would like to describe exactly what we're talking about here. And this is not about necessarily men and women or penis and vagina, although those things are more a reflection of the energies that we're talking about. They don't define or but are rather defined by the actual energies that we're talking about, which is, there's many names. Yin and yang is obviously a very accessible concept. That dualistic nature built into all things in the universe, and they are knowable. They do have very specific characteristics, and you can't go confusing one for the other because they are not at all the same. So that's a big misconception right off the bat. So I mean, and there's a long list of ways that you could separate, the dualistic nature of all things. There's night and day, hot and cold, black and white, hard and soft, and these are all they all in some way sort of correlate really.
right. It's the
um,
polarity.
right, right. And these things, as we are a product of the laws of nature, that's how we got here, that's how we came to be. We reflect those. And so even this concept, if we can just touch on this for a second, this whole gender fluidity idea, I find it very interesting, as a current topic, because it both is and isn't. In other words, so the genders themselves are not fluid in terms of what they are and how they are manifest in reality, but they are fluid in terms of, like all energy, it flows like fluid, and we can lean into one or both, one or the other or both anytime we choose. And really, it's a matter, in my opinion, of the context and the situation, you know, which, so basically, my simple way of putting it is that men, based on, this is not subjective. Oh, did you? Uh, where'd she go? Uh-oh. Where'd you go, Jessica? Hmm, that's no good. Wow, what the hell is happening? Oh,
Oh,
hi.
wait a minute. Now I have to switch my screen. I don't know what just happened. It wouldn't even give me any notification of what happened.
Yeah, you just
Crazy.
totally went black like that.
It just said pause that I could see you talking, and I'm like trying to talk to you.
I'm
Anyways,
here. Okay, anyway, so what I was saying is that men, biologically, this is not really my opinion, it is, subject to circumstance and a lot of different variables, but generally speaking, men, based on their testosterone levels, because testosterone is a hormone of the body that exhibits certain characteristics, just as the energies themselves have certain characteristics that you can see they correlate. So testosterone exhibits masculine, estrogen exhibits feminine
right.
behavior and tendencies. So men tend to have more masculine tendencies naturally, based on their own biology and physiology. And that's not to say that men can't be feminine or women can't be masculine, but usually men are more apt to be better at being masculine or leaning into that because it comes naturally to them. But to me, I think every individual should be balanced in that they're able to tap into either, depending on the situation.
I
But
agree.
a whole other, not to open up a whole other can of worms, but when you're in a relationship with someone, the magic really happens when the man who is say, for just simplicity's sake, a masculine identified man and a feminine identified woman are able to relinquish that polarity, lean into their natural state, and trust the other to be the other side, like a magnet.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's the surrender. And it's
Right.
also knowing that you can in different moments be more, I could be more masculine in a moment with you than, and vice versa. So it's really determining, but there always has to be that polarity between the
Right.
two.
Because again, objectively, as a force of nature, the polarity is what creates attraction.
Right.
So a very masculine man is probably not going to be as attracted to a masculine woman, for example. That's why you
No.
tend to see, like more often than not, a big muscular guy, a petite woman, or even sometimes you see like the very like butch lady, and then the dude's like really short and he's got kind of a high pitched voice, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll wait in the car for you. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's just fine. Yeah." Not to stereotype here, but hey, we're not going for PC, so we're talking real talk right here.
Anarchists never seem to.
No, ain't nobody got time for all that.
I think that's what I said on my recent dating video is like, why do we always have to beat around the bush about everything? Why don't we just be open and honest
Hmm.
in all our conversations?
Totally. Yeah, life's too short, and there, there's too much ignorance running rampant to be walking on eggshells about this. At this point, it's time to get real, like real quick. But and like based on what, or to continue what I was just saying, even within homosexual relationships, there tend to be a more, you got your bears and your twinks, or like the butch versus, you know what I'm saying? Like even within a same-sex relationship, there has to be that polarity for attraction most of the
Right.
time. There are exceptions, there's always exceptions and anomalies, but in general terms, these are, tendencies.
Yeah, well, and oftentimes you'll find the discord in relationships happens when people are either both trying to play one part or the other, you know?
Ooh, very true.
So,
Absolutely. And that's why, like you said yourself, the surrender, which cannot happen without trust. You cannot surrender to someone you don't trust. That only a fool would do such a thing. And so you can't ever hope to have a successful or functional relationship with someone that you don't trust. And yet again, that's another issue you see way too often is people with all these trust issues. They're still together and they're trying to, do this or that, but the trust is not there, and so everything they do is motivated by fear. And I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster.
well, I think the biggest thing, like in my understanding of the masculine and the feminine, is that the masculine is really the ever-present, unchanging consciousness. You know, that
Mm,
ever-present energy that holds space for everything. But the feminine
right.
is the constant change. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you have the masculine who wants so, which we you see now, wanting to hold so strongly onto ideas and beliefs that are no longer serving anyone, and the feminine is like, okay, this is like what's happening now, this is what
Mm,
is changing, and so then you see
absolutely.
that discord there.
Well, so yeah, that's a really interesting point because so like okay, how do I begin, because this is such a big topic, but like we all, especially anyone who's even mildly truth oriented and quote unquote woke, we hear this concept of divide and conquer, which is basically pointing to the Hegelian dialectic, which means you polarize into two options, and offer a solution that you know are both within the realm of what you're trying. That's how you control people. You create a problem, you split them into two, and then you offer a solution, like you want this or you want this, but either choice is according to your agenda, basically. And that's
Right.
what's happening. But in terms of that polarity, the way that they split everything into two is the dual principle in the universe, the very thing that we're talking about. They push people to masculine and feminine imbalances, and you see this everywhere. But the reason I brought this up is because it's on full display with the political paradigm of the left and the right. The conservative right wing corresponds to the masculine, which is the daddy protector archetype, with the police and the military. Daddy's going to keep us safe and bring
Right.
in the wealth. It's very capitalistic. And then the other side, the left, is the mommy archetype, because apparently, they're exploiting the psychology of our parental abandonment issues and filling these roles by proxy through the control structures that exist. But the left wing paradigm is the mommy, the everybody's going to be taken care of, and like the welfare state and the equality, and everybody play fair, and share your toys and all that kind of stuff. It's this the masculine and feminine right there, at play. um but why was I brought that
Oh,
up
and
for a
I
reason,
would
because it
just
was
add
something.
something. Even within those groups, though, you find like with the blue side or whatever, the feminine side, you find a lot of unconscious masculine energy coming out in terms of like there's a war on this, a war on that. Everything is about fighting or resisting something
Mm,
instead of surrender. Which is when
sure.
you fully surrender to something, then you have the ability to actually create something new. And that's how change
Mm,
really happens.
right. Well, the problem is that these masculine and feminine dynamics are being manifest in a toxic way, and therefore they are at war with each other. When you have the toxic masculine and the toxic feminine, they are at war with each other. It's only when you come into the healing modality of love and unification, which is what love is, to unify, to become one, can you truly surrender, because why should I trust the toxic feminine? Because it's toxic. Like, I can't surrender to that. And that's the paradigm that they have people stuck in, is, well, you know they did this and they did that. It's all about like this attack and defense and retaliation mindset, that it's all fueled by ego, obviously. That's what it all is boiling down to there. But you also mentioned something about like, you said, oh, I remember, I was gonna say the because you were talking about the male being the constant and the feminine
Right.
being the changing, and that's exactly how that relates to conservative, keeping it the same, conserving it, or progressive, the
Right.
progressing, let's move forward, right? But both are their forms of what the conservative are trying to conserve are, for the most part, old paradigms that don't serve anymore, and what the progressives are trying to progress are radical new ideas that are very bad for society and anti-freedom. So both sides are, like I said, they're doing what they do in terms of the energy, but in the toxic manifestation or the toxic form of them. Therefore,
Right.
without the healing, they're always going to be at odds with each other.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many people. I love Matt Kahn. He's probably one of my, one of my favorites. But I was listening to him talk about the masculine and the feminine earlier, and he was talking about how the feminine's dharma, or lesson really, is to learn to be worthy of receiving renewal. And I find, I don't know, as a female, I definitely have a hard time receiving, coming from my past relationships, which were abusive. I feel like no one's supporting me or there for me, and so I have like this shield
Mm,
up of distrust. And the only
right.
way to really break free and really to like come to my
The
highest level of consciousness and receiving is to really just surrender to the fact that I am worthy of receiving. And I
right.
think a lot of people struggle with that.
And that's exactly dead on, because you're talking about distrust based on negative experiences. You're talking about, I'm sure, of a relationship with a man, so that you have a traumatic experience that needs healing with the toxic form of masculinity. And the answer is within you, to go within and heal yourself. It's not about seeking anything externally. You have to go within and
Exactly.
heal that from the inside out, because you have the divine masculine within you. And what you are
Exactly.
seeking is within you. And until you can step into that yourself, you're never going to find it out there either. In fact, you're just going to keep attracting what resonates
Right.
with your pain and your trauma that is still there.
Exactly. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, which is
Hmm. Yes. Um, let's see here. There was something I was gonna. So it all comes back to the self, which is the ego. Without the ego, there is no sense of self. That's the part of your brain that is the construct of the self in general, where what it is. It must be healed. The masculine needs to feel the emotions. I'm reading my notes here. The masculine needs to feel the emotions which it is suppressing. That's what the toxic masculine does. It suppresses emotion, and it becomes like a cold, calculated machine with no heart. And let those
well, the
emotions
masculine
flow,
lives in the mind.
specifically the left mind. Yes, because yeah, yeah, it gets dicey, because like, depending on the concept, like the mind and the heart also correlate to the left and right brain, also correlate to the brain stem, as well as the mammalian midbrain. So it just depends on which model you're looking at. But yeah, Um, so the masculine needs to feel those emotions and let them flow in order to process, experience, and surrender control, because that's what all the overinflated ego is all about. I've been hurt, therefore I am in a survival situation. That's what the ego brain is the
Mhm.
survival brain. So therefore I must control all the variables. And yeah, so surrendering control there. The feminine, to heal, needs to learn healthy boundaries, and these all deal with the self, both sides. Feminine needs healthy boundaries which stem from a healthy sense of self and an intrinsic self-love and respect, self-respect, and to not tolerate toxic behavior from anyone or yourself, which is can be simplified by learning how to say no to that which does not serve you, because you love and respect yourself enough to know that this I don't deserve that. And
Right.
any human being, male or female or anything in between, needs to learn these dynamics.
Oh, definitely. Well, and it goes back to the whole self-responsibility. The most generous, I think Brene Brown says, is the most generous people have the most boundaries. And it's because
Hmm.
they take full responsibility for everything in their life, and so they
Hmm.
know what resonates with them, and so they don't hold other people accountable for how they're feeling as a reaction to something. Because
Right.
it's up to you to have boundaries.
Sure. And ironically, you can give the most by knowing how to say no more, simply because
Exactly.
you will let people bleed you dry, and then you're no good to anyone. But if you allow yourself to continue to flourish by learning when to say no, you will actually, in the long run, be able to help more people and give away more of yourself in a healthy way.
I
And
agree.
this was also an interesting realization as I was considering these ideas earlier, is that the wounded masculine turns the hurt outwards towards others, where the wounded feminine turns it inwards to themselves. So again,
Mm,
that's where you have that narcissist versus the empath dynamic that
codependent,
many,
yeah.
yeah, codependent. It's codependent for a reason. It's like the same polar attraction, but in the negative, inverted, perverted way,
In the
because
unconscious.
the narcissist turns that abuse outwards, does it has no empathy, so it's all about it's all about control, manipulation, you
And
know. And
validation.
then that empathetic person doesn't have the self-respect required to say no and to not tolerate that dynamic anymore. And so it's like perfectly symbiotic, or actually rather than symbiotic, I would maybe say mutually parasitic, because they feed each other's mutually parasitic. That's an interesting idea, because they
Right. Well,
equally
and I
feed
think
each
that's
other's toxic needs.
exactly. Well, and I think that's one of the big things that people maybe misunderstand when they're looking at narcissism and codependency. They might view one as like the evil perpetrator, and the other is the victim. And the reality of it is they're both unconscious energies working from their lowest form of vibration. So,
Hmm.
like you said, they're
Yes.
parasitic and they're feeding off of each other. So neither one is willing to take full responsibility, like as somebody who has been in a couple codependent relationships, if you don't take full responsibility for that, then you end up being the victim in every
Mm,
situation.
I wouldn't say full responsibility, but at least half or partial responsibility, because it's never an excuse for other people's behavior in what they have, to their own ignorance of what rights are. But it is partially your responsibility for not defending your rights, because your rights are yours and they are your responsibility only. So to me, this comes back to the two pillars of enlightenment, and every anarchist may be more familiar than most about this, but we always hear the non-aggression principle. That's one of those, like, all too common terms, especially in the freedom and anarchy communities. We all know what that is. You don't initiate violence against someone else. But that in and of itself is useless unless you have the self-defense principle, which is again coming back to no. No, that's a
Right.
boundary. No further. This
Exactly.
is not, this is not acceptable. And without that, you can never, they both must always be present. You can't have one without the other because you
Well,
can't just
and but that,
trust everyone to not violate the nap, you know?
for sure, for sure. But I'm more talking about like taking full responsibility for your lack of boundaries. You know, no one's responsible for that except for you. How
Yeah,
people
well, I
treat
mean,
you is another story.
yeah, well, the concept is the same whether we're talking about actual violence or emotional abuse or anything like that. It's still it's partially on you. I mean, everything it's 50-50. It's equal. I have my own free will and I'm responsible for my actions, but you're responsible for your actions as well. So I have no right to, emotionally abuse you or be violent against you or any of those things, but also you actually don't have the right to allow your rights to be violated because they're your rights. So it's
Right.
it's equally it's a shared responsibility. I'm responsible for not violating your rights, and you're responsible for making sure that no one violates yours. That's my take on that.
Definitely. Well, we could get off way on a tangent. There's Dr. Sue Lin talks about, everything is data, and even Shakespeare talks about this is your mind is but a stage and everything that enters is just an actor on your stage. And so if you everything is just data running around. And so if you take responsibility for all of the data that enters your space, then you have the ability to change or delete that data. So, but that's a whole nother
Well,
topic.
I mean, considering the change component, I'm more open to that idea, but I'm not responsible for anyone else's actions other than my own. So that's why I say it's a give and take. It's a share. Like we are all sharing this one reality. Each individual has their own free will. So, I can't control what other people do, but I can make sure, I can stop, within my own boundaries. And, you know, you have to
Yeah,
find that line, basically.
right. Well, I think ultimately you can be empowered in your ability to own your reaction to whatever it is that is happening around you. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, and I can stop somebody from violating my rights without hating them or being even angry necessarily. And I think anger it has its own useful purpose if it's righteous in its motivation. But ultimately, I can be totally calm and peaceful internally, but still take action which is necessary to not tolerate evil and
Right.
wrongdoing.
Oh yeah. Well, we get to decide who interacts with us in our movie. So,
Hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's why voluntary association as well as voluntary disassociation are vital to freedom. Because, like,
exactly.
you have the right to be an asshole, but I might not want to have anything to do with you, and that's totally fine too. Um,
Completely agree.
I also am very excited to tap into this other concept that and I told you beforehand that I was going to dig a little bit into the esoteric side of things and the occult side of things. So and I think a lot of these concepts are very interesting in how they take many forms and you might recognize that they were there when they were always there, and then like you didn't even realize that that's exactly what they meant. But essentially, when we think about, first of all, the yin and yang, just to start simply with the two before I go into the three, the yin and yang is the two. And so, for example, The Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, was a very deliberate, and hold on, let me put on my tinfoil hat first before I go into this. But the Twin Towers are a very deliberate occult symbol, and there's a specific reason that they were destroyed, and what they built in their place was the one tower. There's a reason for that. That right there in and of itself was an occult ritual of destroying the two and building the one in its stead. Um, so, and then, I mean, the two towers of the Lord of the Rings is the same exact thing. These are all allegories. Occult knowledge is everywhere, but that's why it's called occult, because occult simply means hidden. So that which
Right.
is hidden was always there. Just because it's hidden doesn't make it not there. It just means you didn't see it. So it's like that landmine that you almost stepped on. It was always there until all of a sudden, boom. Um, but to step into the next stage, which is the Holy Trinity, these concepts remain consistent. So that, the yin and yang, and the two towers represent the masculine and feminine principles. But when we talk about the Holy Trinity, the two primary points are the mother and father archetypes. The third is the child or the offspring. And this is, they're all extremely important. That's why you can't have the Trinity without all three. The first two must come first, but that's why I'll explain. The mother is care, the father is knowledge, but the mother, it starts there. That's the true generative principle, the divine feminine, because
Come in, Tara. Sorry,
I, I,
somebody's
I
knocking
would,
on my door.
okay, I would challenge you to try to think of anything that anyone would ever do without care, without what they care about, whether it's a positive or a negative thing. It doesn't have to be good necessarily, or beneficial or benevolent. Any behavior that any one person does, they are motivated solely by what they care about. That care is the feminine principle. The knowledge, because your behavior is also only as good as what you know, right? Like you analyze, you process the information with your brain, and you determine this is my best course of action based on what I know. So if your knowledge is bad, your behavior will not be very good, or you might make a fatal mistake there. But what you don't care about, you won't know about. So it starts with the mother of the care.
Mm.
That's where it all stems from. And ironically, we all come from our mother, right? We
Well,
enter this world from our mother.
my friend, actually, she's here right now, Tara. She said, "Remember, you came from a vagina. Like everyone came.
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
remember where
The
you came
the
from."
Stargate between your legs is how we all entered this world. Um, that's where it starts. But what you care about, you will know about, and those two things combined, just like your parents to create a child, your child is, the offspring is your actions, which are what actually create physical change in this world. You know, everything that is manifest here, yes, they had to start as mind, the principle of mentalism, all is mind first, but I could imagine anything, but if I don't create that with my actions, it will never become manifest.
Well, and actually, something that Matt Kahn mentioned is that, before the word was space, before time was space, and through space was created the word and everything else. Because, in the Bible it talks about how the woman came from the rib and all this stuff. So it makes it seem like the masculine was first, but the reality of it is the space that held everything was there first, which created everything else.
Hmm. Interesting.
So that was just something I came across.
Right. But as I was saying, how these concepts are everywhere, and you might have, may have never I know I didn't recognize their true meanings until I started studying this. But this Holy Trinity, you see it all over the place. Obviously Christianity is most prevalent here in the West, and you have got, Yahweh the Father, the Holy Spirit, which ironically, as a very patriarchal religion, they cut out the goddess, which was Mary, which Mary, the word itself is very symbolic. That's Mary is where you get the word marine or maritime, or mermaid. The mer or the mare is the feminine, which is the water, the emotion. Water represents emotion, which is the divine feminine. Again, it's the care. So that's that's a side note there, but that's what. So you have the Father, the Mother, and they create the Son, which is the action, which is the physical. That's why they say, uh-oh, here we go again. I knew we had it too easy when it started off so smoothly, getting her in here. We had to pay our dues somehow. Let's hope we can get Jessica back in here as easily as once it kicks her out. Maybe there we go. Okay, that's so weird. Okay, I can get you back in here. All right, we're still in.
I don't know what is wait, that has never happened to me, and it's only happened on the conversation with you. But anyway,
Probably my issue with my phone or something. I'm not sure, but we're still here. So
yeah. What else did you want to cover? How about us? How about a solution to this this discontent between the two energies?
um, well, I actually kind of feel like hmm, I feel like when I was talking about, it comes back to the self. That was, I sort of preemptively covered the solution, because no one can heal you for you. And if you aren't healed, you have no business being in a relationship. And as Kevin Orslan recently posted, your spouse or your other is not your therapist. It's not their job. Um, and so ultimately, so like I was saying, the masculine needs to process the emotions which are being stifled, because you
Hmm.
have to that's why the title of this is called The Resurrection of the Sacred Feminine, which means you're reawakening and allowing the flow of energy that is the all, that the essence, the energy of emotion, energy and motion, emotion, and then the feminine needs to also learn that level of self-love that also will
You have one
facilitate
unread message.
will facilitate healthy boundaries.
Right.
And those two, and then when you've achieved that, and you don't need anyone else to feel normal or validated or worthy or any of those things that
Right.
we so many times are seeking in other people,
Well, yeah, no one
because
can fill
we're
up the gap
not
with you.
giving it to ourselves. Only then are we ready to truly tap into and reunite through another.
Well, yeah, it's like the three stages of really, being independent, thinking you don't need anyone, and then, desperately wanting somebody, and then two whole people coming together. They already have everything that they need, but they
Mm,
enjoy the polarity of what they can create together.
right, right. It's like any partnership, really. Like if you say you want to build a house and you choose to partner with someone who's just sitting around on their phone and they keep knocking down what you're building. I mean, like in that case, you're better off by yourself. So like, like there's no value there. So that would be the first stage where you're trying to link up, but it's not equal in some way. So you might as well just try to do it alone. But then at the same time, if you know that you're not going to be, the dead weight, and you can find a partner that is also on that level, you could build the house in half the time. I mean, that's a very like clunky sort of metaphor, but it gets the point across. Is the point is first you have to recognize that you are enough, but then you recognize that you can always be more through the connection, through the unification of you know, destroying or maybe surpassing the illusion of separation.
Right. I
Yeah.
agree.
But it
Love
all
it.
starts with the care. Because if you don't care, you will never change it. That's why,
Mm.
if you've ever heard of the Bohemian Grove, is a redwood forest in
Oh yeah.
California where all
I
the
used to
elites
live
like to
there.
get together. Yeah. And they do a ceremony called the cremation of care. I mean, it doesn't get any more obvious than that. They are burning in a symbolic effigy the concept of care, the feminine heart component. That's why also if you know about the Skull and Bones Society or even like the Jolly Roger flag, it's the skull and crossbones, which is signifying the mind and the actions without the heart, because
Ooh.
that's what they want. The machine mind taking action, that's exactly why they are in control, because what they care about, and they have the knowledge to back it up, and they're actually taking action. That's why the universe is seeming to favor them right now,
Mm.
because that's
Wow.
what the universe responds to. That's what natural law really means. And that's why a
Very.
lot of the New Age ideologies are designed to minimalize the action component. They think that you're going to create actual change in the world by sitting in your room meditating and burning sage and sitting with your crystals. I mean, that's all good and fine and well. There's nothing wrong with that, but
Well,
that
we need a
alone is
balance
not
of the
ever.
two.
We have to balance them, absolutely. I agree. But that's what I'm saying. You know, that alone is not enough. You have to actually take action and change and frankly step into that masculine energy of saying no. This is not okay and we're not going to tolerate it.
Right. Well, I think it's happening, and it's happening because of conversations like this. So,
And viewers like you.
well, thank you. I don't mean to run on you, but I didn't realize you were going to go as long as we did, just because we kind of got off on a weird start. But thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Looking
You know,
forward to
this was
having
a lot of
more
fun.
conversations
I'd love to do another chat sometime,
for
maybe on a
sure.
different topic or something. But
There's so many, but they all
there's
kind of lead back to the same truth, which is all about this.
right and that, this and that, little of
For
both.
sure.
All right, Jessica. Well, I hope you have a good evening. I hope everyone enjoyed watching this,
Thank
and
you.
we will see you
Yeah,
next
thanks everyone
time.
for watching, and well, I will share it to my page, and hopefully we'll get some more interaction.
All right. Much love.
Thanks.
Bye.